Welcome to Grow Up Wealth, where we deliver the most captivating stories from the world of finance and power. Today, we'll dive into the extraordinary beginnings of J.P. Morgan, a man who turned personal struggle into global influence and redefined what it means to lead. Stay with us, because the lessons from his early life will ignite your ambition and sharpen your focus. If you're ready to transform your mindset, subscribe to Grow Up Wealth now, and let's step into the world of power, resilience, and financial mastery. Family, foundations, and childhood. John Pierpont Morgan wasn't just born into wealth, he was born into pressure. Born on April 17, 1837, in Hartford, Connecticut, he entered a family of towering expectations. His father, Junius Spencer Morgan, wasn't just a banker. He was a man obsessed with reputation, honor, and building a legacy that would stretch across continents. But behind the privilege was a boy fighting battles no one saw. Pierpont's childhood was marked by sickness, seizures, fevers, chronic migraines, and a skin condition that disfigured his nose, haunting him for life. Where other boys played outside, Pierpont sat indoors, alone with books, numbers, and the weight of his own mind. This isolation, though painful, sparked his first major life lesson. When the body is weak, strengthen the mind. Pierpont devoured history, studied military strategy, and became fascinated by the mechanics of power. While friends collected celebrity autographs, Morgan admired generals, strategists, and economists. His childhood hero, Napoleon Bonaparte, not for the glory, but for the precision and planning behind every move. His father, Junius, recognized his son's relentless mind but was determined to harden him further. When Junius became a partner at London's George Peabody & Co., he sent 17-year-old Pierpont to Europe, far from home, to train at elite schools in Switzerland and Germany. Here, Pierpont polished his intellect, learned multiple languages, and built a global perspective, rare for an American at the time. Teachers saw in him not just intelligence, but an unshakable will to lead. Lesson: master more than what's required. Morgan didn't just learn finance. He learned languages, cultures, and strategies, giving him an edge over local competitors for decades to come. Returning to the U.S., Pierpont entered finance on his own terms, joining Duncan, Sherman & Kober as a clerk. But he didn't stay in the shadows for long. Where others saw routine, Morgan saw opportunity, analyzing global markets, advising his father across the Atlantic, and quickly earning a reputation as sharp, insightful, and unafraid. Lesson: influence matters more than titles. Even as a young clerk, Morgan was already reshaping conversations at the top. He understood that it's not about where you start, but how you think and act. And while many elite heirs chased luxury, Morgan chased control. From his earliest days, he knew that money was just a tool, but influence, that was real power. Let's break down 3 key takeaways from this condensed yet powerful origin story. 1. Your setbacks are fuel. Morgan's illnesses could have crushed him, but they forced him to build an iron mind. 2. Go beyond your competition. Don't stop at local skills. Acquire global knowledge, cultural intelligence, and multidimensional thinking. 3. Build reputation before riches. Junius taught Pierpont that trust, not cash, is the ultimate currency. As you reflect on your own journey, ask yourself, what challenges can I turn into strengths? What knowledge am I missing that could give me a hidden advantage? What does my reputation say about me today? And what do I want it to say tomorrow? J.P. Morgan's childhood wasn't just the beginning of a wealthy man's story. It was the forging of a strategist, a leader, and eventually, the man who would stand between America and financial collapse. In the next chapter, we'll follow his rise on Wall Street, his first great risks, and how he started to weave the threads of an empire. 2. The rise on Wall Street. Returning from Europe, Morgan stepped onto the bustling streets of New York, not as a naive heir, but as a sharp, globally minded young banker. He joined Duncan, Sherman & Co., not under the protective wing of his father, but determined to prove himself. His first big test came unexpectedly. On a trip to New Orleans, Morgan encountered a ship captain stuck with an entire cargo of unsold coffee. Sensing opportunity, Morgan acted fast, using company funds to buy the shipment and sell it at a profit to local merchants. He didn't just save a deal, he demonstrated one of the most critical business lessons. Lesson: speed. Confidence, culture, advantage. In a world where most people hesitate, the one who moves decisively wins. By his mid-20s, Morgan was already making waves. But ambition alone wasn't enough. He needed control. In the 1860s, Morgan founded his own firm, J. Pierpont Morgan & Co. This was the age of American industrial expansion. Railroads were reshaping the nation, steel was surging, and oil barons were emerging. Morgan didn't just want to watch, he wanted to shape these industries. His strategy? Go where others saw chaos. The railroad industry was a battlefield of cutthroat competition, overlapping routes, and price wars that destroyed profits. But Morgan saw a higher game: consolidation. Lesson: see beyond the immediate fight. While rivals battled each other, Morgan envisioned unifying forces, cutting waste and stabilizing industries, turning rivals into collaborators under his guidance. One of his most famous moves came aboard his private yacht, the Corsair. There, he locked in feuding railroad executives and refused to dock until they reached an agreement. By the time they stepped back on shore, Morgan had created the Corsair Compact, a peace deal that stabilized an entire sector. Lesson: leadership isn't about shouting. It's about commanding the room with purpose. Morgan didn't just own stock. He demanded a seat at the table, reshaped boards, and set new directions. His influence spread, touching steel, energy, finance, and beyond. But no story of power is complete without risks. In the Hall Carbine affair, Morgan backed a deal that resold refurbished rifles to the Union Army at a hefty markup during the Civil War. The press slammed him. Critics called him a war profiteer. Yet Morgan emerged stronger, learning a critical truth. Lesson: power attracts criticism. Wear it as armor, not as chains. For every setback, Morgan recalibrated, refined his approach, and doubled down on his long-term vision. By the end of the 19th century, J.P. Morgan wasn't just a banker. He was the architect of American capitalism. His hand was in every major industrial consolidation, and his name signaled trust, stability, and unshakable resolve. Before we move on, let's pause and extract the key lessons you can apply right now. 1. Act when others freeze. Waiting for perfect conditions means you'll always miss the window. 2. Control matters more than ownership. Morgan understood that pulling the strings was more powerful than simply holding shares. 3. Accept criticism as part of the climb. The higher you rise, the louder the voices. Stay focused. Ask yourself, where can I move faster today? How can I consolidate scattered efforts into something stronger? What criticism am I afraid of, and how can I face it head-on? In the next chapter, we'll explore how J.P. Morgan transitioned from an industrial force to the man who would rescue the U.S. government itself, proving that sometimes the line between private power and national survival is thinner than we think. 3. The man who saved America. By the late 1800s, J.P. Morgan wasn't just a banker, he was the backbone of American industry. But soon, his power would be tested on a national scale. In 1893, the U.S. was hit by a devastating financial panic. The gold reserves backing the U.S. dollar were dwindling fast, and confidence in the American economy was crumbling. Without swift action, the country faced collapse. President Grover Cleveland turned to one man: Morgan. Lesson: when you become the only solution, you become indispensable. Morgan devised a daring plan. By rallying a syndicate of international investors, he secured a $65 million gold loan to backstop the Treasury. The deal restored faith in the dollar, stabilized the markets, and kept the U.S. afloat, all without waiting for congressional approval. Lesson: don't wait for permission when survival is at stake. But that wasn't the end. In 1907, another crisis emerged, the infamous Panic of 1907. Banks were failing, trust companies were collapsing, and Wall Street was spiraling. Once again, all eyes turned to Morgan. At age 70, Morgan gathered the nation's top bankers in his personal library, locked the doors, and told them no one would leave until a solution was reached. Through the night, he negotiated, persuaded, and cajoled until a rescue package was in place. Lesson: true leaders stand tallest in the darkest hour. By the next morning, Morgan had single-handedly saved America's financial system. The stock market stabilized, depositors' fears eased, and the country avoided a catastrophic depression. But here's the twist: Morgan wasn't saving the country for charity. He knew that saving the system also protected his empire, his wealth, his clients, and his influence. Lesson: align your mission so that saving others also strengthens you. This chapter of Morgan's life teaches us: 1. Be prepared to lead when others freeze. Crises separate the real leaders from the pretenders. 2. Build networks before you need them. Morgan could summon the nation's top bankers because he spent decades earning their respect. 3. Understand that your interests and the system's stability are intertwined. Morgan's genius was recognizing that by saving the bigger picture, he saved himself. Ask yourself, am I building trust and alliances before the storm hits? Do I have the courage to step up when the stakes are highest? How can I design my work so that helping others also secures my future? In the next chapter, we'll explore the backlash Morgan faced, from antitrust lawsuits to public outrage, and how he navigated the fine line between influence and overreach. 4. Facing the backlash. Power under fire. By the early 1900s, J.P. Morgan had reached the pinnacle of influence. He controlled vast networks in railroads, steel, banking, and energy. But with great power comes great scrutiny. In 1902, President Theodore Roosevelt, a champion of the progressive era, set his sights on the nation's monopolies, and Morgan's Northern Securities Company was his prime target. This holding company controlled vast railroad interests, and the government argued it violated the Sherman Antitrust Act. Lesson: when you grow too big, expect the system to push back. Morgan was shocked. Unlike many industrialists, he believed in order, regulation, and cooperation with the government. But Roosevelt wanted to prove that no man, no matter how powerful, was above the law. In a historic lawsuit, the Supreme Court ruled against Morgan, breaking up Northern Securities in 1904. The press painted Morgan as a symbol of unchecked capitalism, a man whose influence reached too far. Lesson: influence requires balance. Too much, and you invite destruction. Despite the public attacks, Morgan adapted. He shifted his focus, strengthened other ventures, and even worked alongside Roosevelt on financial matters when the need arose. Morgan understood that real power wasn't about crushing opposition. It was about staying in the game, adjusting, and continuing to lead. But the pressure didn't stop there. As public anger toward Wall Street grew, Congress launched the Pujo Committee in 1912, investigating the so-called money trust. Morgan was called to testify, grilled by lawmakers determined to expose the extent of his financial empire. Lesson: transparency is no longer optional when you dominate a system. To the surprise of many, Morgan handled the hearings with composure and sharp wit. When asked if credit was based primarily on money or property, Morgan famously replied, "No, sir. The first thing is character. His answer captivated the nation and reminded everyone why he remained trusted despite criticism. Lesson: character is your ultimate leverage. Morgan's ability to survive these attacks came not just from wealth or power, but from decades of reputation building, alliances, and an unshakable command of his industry. Let's break down the key lessons from this turbulent chapter. 1. Expect resistance at the top. The higher you climb, the more visible you become. 2. Adapt, don't break. When one venture falls, redirect your energy. Resilience matters more than perfection. 3. Protect your character relentlessly. When reputation is your strongest asset, guard it fiercely. Ask yourself, how am I preparing for the challenges that come with success? Am I adaptable enough to survive setbacks without losing momentum? Is my character strong enough to withstand public scrutiny? In the next and final chapter, we'll explore J.P. Morgan's personal struggles, his enduring legacy, and the final moments that sealed his place in history. 5. Legacy, lessons, and the final years. Despite his towering success, J.P. Morgan was not invincible. As the years passed, his health declined. His famous red-purple nose, worsened by rosacea, made him self-conscious in public. Behind closed doors, he faced anxiety, bouts of depression, and crushing exhaustion. Lesson: even the strongest leaders carry invisible burdens. Morgan poured his energy not just into finance, but into art, philanthropy, and cultural preservation. His private art collection, one of the finest in the world, spanned centuries and continents. From Leonardo da Vinci manuscripts to priceless paintings, Morgan was driven by a desire to protect beauty and history. In 1912, Morgan narrowly escaped, boarding the Titanic, a tragic twist of fate that preserved his life for one final chapter. But just a year later, while traveling in Rome, J.P. Morgan passed away quietly in his sleep. His death shocked the world. Wall Street went silent. The New York Stock Exchange closed until noon in his honor, a tribute reserved for kings, not bankers. Lesson: true impact is measured by how the world pauses when you're gone. Morgan's legacy wasn't just his wealth. It was the institutions he built, the industries he stabilized, and the trust he commanded. His son, J.P. Morgan Jr., inherited the business, but the father's name remained immortal. Most importantly, Morgan's life offers enduring lessons for anyone who wants to lead, create, or leave their mark. 1. Focus on what endures. Morgan invested not just in money, but in reputation, art, and influence, assets that outlive cash. 2. Power is responsibility. Morgan didn't just build. He bailed out governments, stabilized markets, and protected systems others depended on. 3. Character over everything. In Morgan's words, "A man I do not trust could not get money from me on all the bonds in Christendom." Trust was his greatest asset. So ask yourself today, what am I building that will outlast me? How am I using my influence to strengthen others? Is my character aligned with the legacy I want to leave? As we close this journey, remember, J.P. Morgan wasn't just a banker. He was a builder of worlds, a steward of stability, and a master of influence. If this story inspired you, subscribe to Grow Up Wealth, hit that like button, and share this video with someone you know is ready to think bigger. Thank you for joining us. Stay smart, stay ambitious, and remember, the greatest legacies are built not in years, but in the impact you make. We'll see you next time on Grow Up Wealth, where we turn history's greatest stories into your next breakthrough. J.P. Morgan didn't gamble. He built. Through vision, leadership, and relentless focus, he shaped a nation's financial destiny. He reminds us that true influence doesn't come from noise. It comes from quiet, deliberate mastery. As you all build your own future, remember, real power is silent, steady, and unstoppable. Thank you for joining Grow Up Wealth today. If you found value in this journey, please like, subscribe, and share this video with others chasing greatness. And remember, Grow Up Wealth is here to bring you timeless lessons from history's greatest financial minds. See you in the next story. Stay smart, stay ambitious.